Hello, dear friends. I'm sure that the future of humankind is glorious, even if the present is problematic. Opinion piece. Plans for a utopian future. It started in the 50s in the Navy. Wanted to reach the galactic future by 2060. Starfleet to protect commercial activities. New generation of space vehicles by 2030. Navy's 8 fleets are called Solar Guardian. British hacker Gary McKinnon saw one of the ships. Russia and China failed to win support for their space alliance. Thousands of flock to Kabul airport on eve of withdrawal. Worldwide dismay at Kabul airport attack. Sidney Powell, Lin Wood, and other lawyers sanctioned in Michigan. United Nations concludes that Judge Garzon's disbarment was arbitrary. Let's start. Plans for a Star Trek type utopian future, which should be achieved by the year 2060, began with the US Navy in the 50s and was most recently revealed in the recommendations of a Space Futures workshop, according to Dr. Michael Sala. The outcome of the Jupiter meetings is that there is now a comprehensive international framework for the creation of a utopian, non-dystopian future. This requires the creation of a unified political military command in space. The future Starfleet would provide military protection for commercial and civilian space activities. Meanwhile, an attempt by Russia and China to establish their own multinational space alliance through a joint lunar research station has failed to garner sufficient international support. Definition. A utopia is the imaginative representation of a future society of characteristics conducive to human good, that is, a perfect and idealized society, while a dystopia would be the fictional representation of a future society of negative characteristics causing human alienation. The word comes from the Hellenistic utopia, an imaginary island with a perfect political, social and legal system described by Thomas More in 1516 during the Renaissance, where he describes a model for an ideal society with minimal levels of crime, violence and poverty. Utopianism, or the utopian engine, is essential for the improvement of the human condition, because you create what you believe in, and if you don't believe, you don't create. What is the Federation? The Galactic Federation is a cooperation of spacefaring civilizations that travel in our Milky Way galaxy. The Federation consists of hundreds of thousands of members and was founded millions of years ago after a series of wars in the constellation Lyra. The destruction that occurred on that occasion led the survivors to try to resolve the conflicts peacefully. Every inhabited galaxy in our universe has a federation, but ours is one of the oldest. The Galactic Federation was a huge fleet of spaceships at its disposal that mediate or, if necessary, intervene wherever there are conflicts. The interdimensional technologies they can use are of such high level that we can hardly imagine them. Their control of energy is almost perfect, so that such things as dematerializing, becoming invisible, and creating small spheres of energy that can be released with a mission. For example, creating drawings on crops are no problem for them. Their ships are often made of living material. Some are as large as planets and are fully self-sufficient with forests, fields and rivers. The Federation fleet consists of ships from the participating nations and several fleets operating individually. History. Several million years ago, the Galactic Federation worked closely with the High Council of Sirius to serve as a cutting race to help support the seeding and evolutionary process of planet Earth in its lowest density for the first harmonic universe. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built as an harmonic resonance chamber with an interdimensional portal system where visiting spacecraft could time travel and access the Earth plane very quickly, especially if intervention was needed. During the cycle in which the Great Pyramid was built in the pre-Atlantic area, the Galactic Federation was charged with protecting the Stargate and the Ascension Chamber within the pyramid and intervening in the event of an attack by hostile intruders such as the Anunnaki resistance. The Great Pyramid was a mystery school for Melchizedek's Blue Flame Spiritual Ascension program and to accelerate DNA assembly for portal passage through the inner Earth portal under the Sphinx. Background. Gene Roddenberry created his Star Trek television series as a work of fiction in 1966, but was secretly briefed on the operations of a future Navy space program that would lead humankind to join an interplanetary organization similar to his fictional United Federation of Planets. On the other hand, the so-called Galactic Federation of Free Alliances, better known as the Galactic Alliance, is a fictional government in the expanded universe of Star Wars, George Lucas' original work. Star Trek was a media franchise created by Gene Roddenberry. The first television series was called Star Trek. The original series premiered in 1966 and ran for 3 seasons on NBC. It followed the interstellar adventures of Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, and his crew aboard the Starship Enterprise, a fictional space exploration vessel built by the United Federation of Planets in the 23rd century. Aid to the Navy. From 1950 to 1963, the Galactic Federation secretly helped the Navy design and build future fleets of space vehicles, destroyers and support ships with interstellar capability, according to William Tompkins. The relationship between the US Navy and the Federation has grown so close that the next generation of space vehicles to be launched in the 2030s is being built not anywhere on Earth but in the space docks of a planet in another solar system, according to Tompkins. In March 2019, the Air Force Space Command hosted a future of a space workshop that examined 8 scenarios of what would happen in space in the next 40 years. Each scenario was evaluated in terms of its civilian, commercial and military impact on Earth and in space. The workshop was attended by 60 experts from multiple national space programs, aerospace companies and military organizations from around the world. Of the 8 scenarios, the experts choose a Star Trek future as the optimal outcome. The creation of a multinational space alliance, the Artemis Accords, the intervention of the Galactic Federation of Inhabited Worlds, and an unknown temporal war involving Earth, the Moon, and Mars are some of the recent space events relevant to Star Trek type future. Currently, the 8 fleets of the Navy's space battle groups are widely known as Solo Warden or Solo Guardian, and are led by cigar-shaped space vehicles. One of the space vehicles was spotted by British hacker Gary McKinnon in 2002. Afghanistan. More than 60 dead after double bombing at Kabul airport. More than 60 people were killed and 150 injured after a double bombing near Kabul airport on Thursday, many of whom were part of the crowd trying to reach one of the international evacuation flights. 12 US soldiers killed in Kabul in double bombing. At least 12 US soldiers lost his life and 15 others were wounded in a double bombing Thursday at Kabul airport, which was followed by an armed attack. Islamic State claims double bombing near Kabul airport. The Afghan branch of the Islamic State group on Thursday claimed responsibility for a double bombing that left dozens dead near the Kabul airport. They will pursue Islamic State. US military commanders both pursue Islamic State after the suicide bombing at Kabul airport claimed by the militant group, even as US forces continued evacuations from Afghanistan. New Islamic State attacks expected in Kabul. The US expects the Islamic State to launch more terrorist attacks in Kabul, maintained Kenneth McKenzie Jr., head of the Central Command. In quotes, we expect these attacks to continue. The senior official said and reported that the US asked Taliban commanders to take additional security measures to prevent another suicide bombing on the airport perimeter. Thousands flocked to Kabul airport on eve of end of withdrawal. Thousands of Afghans continue to arrive at Kabul airport in an attempt to flee the country on evacuation flights, despite restrictions imposed by the Taliban and security risks. Taliban condemned Kabul airport bombing. In quotes, we condemned the terrorist act, said Taliban Cultural Commission spokesman Abdul Kahar Balki, referring to the 2 explosions at the gates of Kabul airport. International community shocked by double bombing at Kabul airport. The international community is shocked by the double bombing outside the Kabul airport orchestrated by Daesh. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has condemned the attack and called on allied countries to work together to prevent the resurgence of terrorism in Afghanistan. The European Union insists on creating safe roads to Kabul airport after attack. The President of the European Union, the European Council, Charles Michel, on Thursday expressed his concern over the attack in the vicinity of the Kabul airport that has left several people dead and reiterated the request of the European Union to ensure safe access roads to the airfield. UK continue Kabul evacuations despite attack. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said his government will continue its evacuation operation in Afghanistan after suspected suicide bombers attacked the crowded gates of Kabul airport. Afghan banks reopen. After more than a week of closures, banks in Afghanistan are beginning to reopen, drawing crowds of hundreds of people eager to finally get their hands on cash. Financial institutions in Kabul closed on the afternoon of August 15th, just before former President Ashraf Ghani fled. Afghanistan's bank prepare for chaos. Afghanistan's bank face an uncertain future, say their bankers, with doubts over everything from liquidity to the employment of female staff after the Taliban came to power. Afghan journalists begin uncertain chapter under Taliban rule. Journalists are wondering whether to stay or go after the Afghan Taliban, known for its restrictions on the media, came to power. US drone pilots leak footage on airstrikes in Afghanistan. The investigation was conducted by Connecting Bets, which interviewed several operators, military lawyers, and Air Force Joint Terminal Attack Controllers. Drone pilots leaked a video of strikes which were conducted in 2019 in Afghanistan and resulted in the deaths of several civilians, including at least one child. 843 Afghans have been referred to reception centers in different Spanish regions. A total of 718 Afghans have already been referred to reception centers of the Ministry of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration, and distributed among 14 autonomous communities, in addition to 125 more who were scheduled for this Thursday. Economy. Stock market closes lower, ending Afghanistan rally. Wall Street lost ground on Thursday, ending a streak of record closing highs on concerns over developments in Afghanistan, while fears of a possible change in Federal Reserve policy prompted a broad but shallow sell-off. US continues 1.6% growth in the second quarter. The US economy continues its gradual recovery with 1.6% growth in gross domestic product in the second quarter of the year. Dollar to run out of steam as Fed tightens. The dollar rose Thursday as the Fed's Jackson Hole Symposium approaches, but tapering of Fed bonds is unlikely to save the greenback. Investors' psychosis over Powell's lack of room to act. Fed hawks circling ahead of Powell's speech as they push for a bond taper. The hawkish wing of the Federal Reserve used the day before a high-profile speech by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell to call on the central bank to begin tapering bond purchases they feel are harmful. Bitcoin's 60% rally from its July lows fades. Bitcoin's burst above the $50,000 level didn't last long, and charts indicate that its rally since July is in danger of fading. The largest cryptocurrencies fell as much as 4.9% on Thursday to $46,322. $46,322, and other tokens, including Ether, retreated. Europe. ECB may reduce need for bond purchases. ECB officials found in July that its new inflation strategy and changes to its commitment on the future path of interest rates could end up reducing the need for ultra-expansionary monetary policy. Policymakers pledged last month that they will not raise borrowing costs until they see consumer prices growing sustainably at a 2% pace. Germans buy a lot of gold. Demand for physical bullion in Germany, traditional Europe's biggest buyer of coins and bars, was the highest since at least 2009 in the first half, while buying in other Western markets has also been strong. Germans in particular are investing in the metal as a hedge against rising inflation, and dealers say business remains good. Spanish citizens have left 1,575 billion euros worth of peseta bills and coins unexchanged after the June 30th deadline for exchanging them, according to data from the Bank of Spain. Spanish salaries rise by 1.5%, half of the rate of inflation. Barely 568,000 Spanish workers are enjoying pay rises that allow them to offset or beat the rise in prices over the last year, spurred on by the increase in the electricity bill and the price of fuel, according to Pablo Ferreal. China's boycott of Australia has redirected global coal flows. Since Beijing instituted an official boycott of Australian coal last October, global coal flows have undergone a major reshuffle. While Chinese imports of Australian coal have been reduced to zero, imports from other countries have surged to fill the gap. Coal accounts for almost 60% of China's energy consumption. Miscellany. Sidney Powell, Lin Wood, and other pro-Trump lawyers sanctioned in Michigan. 9 lawyers allied with the former President Trump face financial fines and other sanctions after a judge said Wednesday they had abused the court system with a lawsuit challenging Michigan's election outcome. United Nations finds Judge Garzon's disqualification arbitrary. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has ruled that former Audiencia Nacional Judge Baltasar Garzón was disqualified in an arbitrary process when he was investigating the cattle case, and calls on Spain for effective reparation because the Supreme Court violated his presumption of innocence. Miami migrants are in agriculture, science, and manufacturing. Migrants in Miami-Dade make up slightly more than a half of the total population of this southeast Florida county, but represent a large majority of the workforce in the business and agriculture, manufacturing and technology sectors, according to a study. Supreme Court allows Wait in Mexico program to be reinstated. The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday rejected government request to stay enforcement of a federal judge's order reinstating the Wait in Mexico program, which requires asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while their cases are being resolved in the U.S. The Supreme Court also rejected a government request to stay enforcement of a federal judge's order reinstating the Wait in Mexico program, which requires asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while their cases are being resolved on U.S. soil. Nicaraguan naval force calls to protect life due to cyclone threat. The Nicaraguan Army Naval Force called the population of the Caribbean coast to protect life due to the threat posed by the formation of a tropical cyclone in the coming days. Mali's former Prime Minister arrested for corruption. The exact reason for Boubeye Maiga's arrest is unclear, but it was related to Mali's 2014 purchase of a plane for $40 million, his lawyer said. Brazil's Supreme Court to rule on indigenous rights. Before 1988, Brazil's indigenous peoples were persecuted, their ears cut off by hired killers for being land owners. Thousands of indigenous Brazilians, adorned with colorful paint, beads at the feeders, have set up a protest camp in front of the Supreme Court ahead of a historic ruling on whether they can reclaim lost ancestral lands. One man makes a rag out of his dead puppy's skin and it goes viral. A TikToker has caused controversy after the share of a disturbing video showing a rag made out of his pug dog's skin. The man, named Joel Granados, explains that in order to transform his pet into a small rag, he had it stuffed, although he thought it would look nicer. Now he has it as an ornament on one of the armchairs in his house. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.